Hey everybody. I often go on about the bacterial colonies that we have living in our good, healthy, functioning aquariums. And I got an email not too long ago from a viewer that unfortunately got lost in the shuffle, and I deleted it before I ever really got a chance to read it. But it did suggest looking into using Rid-X in my aquarium to help do all the things that I always talk about these biological cultures doing. And so this morning I finally got around to looking into that, and sure enough there is this sort of belief and this idea in the hobby of using Rid-X in our aquariums. And so I did a little research on my own, and I found 3 different types of articles discussing the use of Rid-X, mostly in our septic systems, which is where Rid-X is meant to be used. But I did find information about Rid-X and how it works and what it's doing, and ultimately I came to the conclusion that what I always preach is what I'm going to continue preaching, which is to let your aquarium function naturally without adding a bunch of different additives to it and so on and so forth. So that's the long and short of it right there. But if you want a little more detail, I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of how all this stuff works and how your septic system works and all that kind of stuff, but I will talk about the 3 different type of articles I read, and I'm going to start by explaining what Rid-X is for any of those of you who don't know. Rid-X is an additive that you put into your septic system. You basically flush it down the toilet, and it's supposed to add bacteria and enzymes that are beneficial to your septic system. A septic system is very much like an aquarium in the sense that it has to have this natural balance of natural decomposition of the organic waste that's in there, and then that gets processed and broken down. And I'm again not going to get into the details of it, but you should have what is known as effluent or wastewater that will run out of your septic system, leaving the solid material behind, and then the wastewater runs down through a drain field and eventually drains down into the water table. So as I got to looking into this stuff, as I said, I found 3 different types of articles. The first type of article we can sort of dismiss out of hand because it's the article that is really an advertisement in disguise, and when you look into who's sponsoring this article or who's doing this research or whatever, you can clearly see the whole page is one big advertisement for a particular product or a particular brand of products or whatever. So I found a lot of those because there are other products out there. Ultra Clean and Ultra Pure, I believe, is one of them. There's a few different brands out there that are basically Rid-X for your aquarium. They do the exact same thing. And what they're supposed to do is add bacteria that produce enzymes which break down biological waste. Now that sounds a little weird and it gets a little complicated because the enzymes themselves don't digest the waste. They simply break it down. The bacteria produce the enzymes, and then the enzymes will actually break the waste down into smaller bits, if you will. You can kind of think of them as sort of chopping the food up with the knife and the fork, and then the bacteria in the tank or the septic system has to then digest or really actually decompose those organic waste materials. So keep that in mind. You've got some bacteria that produces the enzymes. The enzymes themselves don't actually deal with the waste. They just make it easier to manage. They break it down into bite-sized chunks, if you will. But you still need the bacteria to then finish off all those bite-sized chunks. So if you only go through the first part of the process of having the enzymes breaking it all down, you wind up with not enough bacteria to then consume all of this stuff you've broken down. Essentially, you're breaking it down faster than the bacteria is able to really fully digest it. And so that's the process, or that's the idea of what's going on. So when you read the industry articles, the ones that are from the products that are saying you need this stuff in your aquarium, again, we can dismiss those out of hand, because if you read those, then you'll believe that you can't possibly have a functioning aquarium without using this stuff. So we're not going to pay any attention to those. The other industry insider is the septic system and the plumbing industry. And all of the articles that are written by the plumbing industry describe the process I was just talking about. I got a little ahead of myself there. They talk about this process where the waste gets broken down faster than it should, and then your septic system can't deal with it, and then what winds up happening is some of this really small broken down waste winds up going out with your wastewater or the effluent, and it eventually begins depositing in your drain field and ultimately will clog your drain field, which will then back up your septic system. So the industry insiders, the plumbing people, the septic system people and all those, they say not to use these products in your septic system because of what I just explained. It breaks the stuff down too fast. It's, you know, there's got to be this balance. Again, much like your aquarium, there has to be this balance between how fast it's breaking down versus how fast it can be dealt with. Again, all this stuff ties very neatly into how we have to manage our aquariums. That's why I'm talking about this. So the third type of article, the most important type of article, and the article that I rely on mostly, was the scientific articles and the articles that were simply studying the process of what does these, you know, I'll say Rid-X, but whatever, there's plenty of brands out there that claim to do the same thing. There are these enzymes boosters and so on and so forth that you put into your septic system to see, you know, what are they doing? Are they actually doing what they claim to be doing? And the scientific study after study after study shows the exact same thing, which is there's no discernible difference in the bacterial loads before or after. You know, it's basically like pouring a glass of water into a swimming pool. I'm sure there's some way you can measure the change in depth of water after you've poured a glass of water into a swimming pool, but for all intents and purposes, it's doing nothing. So that's what all the science shows about what this Rid-X or these other products are doing in your septic system. They're not doing anything. They're basically, they may be adding some bacterial load, but they're not adding enough bacterial load to make any kind of difference whatsoever. So the end result of all of these conclusions, not the advertisement ones, but both the septic system people that say don't use these products because it does too good of a job, and then the science articles that say don't use these products because you're wasting your money, all of them agree that if you've got a fully functioning, properly functioning septic system, you don't need to add these benefits. And that's the point I always make about our aquariums. You have to have these balanced biological functions going on in your tank. If you over clean your tank, if you over water change your tank, if you always remove all the moam, if you always scrape all the algae out of there, all of these things play a role in our aquarium, and if you're knocking any one of them out of balance, it throws the whole system out of whack, and you'll never get on top of keeping a tank well maintained. Leaving your tank alone, letting it develop its own biome, you know, its own biological colonies and everything that's going to grow in that tank, and doing minimum maintenance to it. Obviously, it's a closed system, so we do have to do maintenance on it, and this is just stuff you'll get the feel for over time. You'll begin to learn to not fear algae or not fear a little bit of moam or dirty looking aspect in your tank. My healthiest tanks are some of my dirtiest looking tanks, and they tick over like clocks without ever having an issue. And that's the long and short of it. If you've got a healthy, functioning tank and a fully functioning biological culture within your tank, you've got nice, good depth of substrate. Doesn't necessarily have to be a deep sand bed substrate, but if you've got enough depth of substrate that some bacterial cultures can grow in there, if you've got enough nooks and crannies and stuff builds up and you got rocks and plants and some woodwork, you in time will develop this whole entire ecosystem within your tank that does rely on you being part of that, doing routine maintenance to keep it balanced. But your tank should do a lot of the work on its own. If you've got fish poop that just lies around for days and drifts around on the bottom and never really breaks down or decomposes, that's a sign of a dysfunctional bacterial colony or biome in your tank. That should break down fairly quickly, and you shouldn't have to put these biological sort of superchargers in there. Again, there's a lot of different products out there that are basically Rid-X for your aquarium. They're designed to simply supercharge the decomposition of all this biological product. And if you're running your aquarium properly, you shouldn't have to worry about those. It should do that by itself. There should be plenty of bacteria in the tank to do that. And that's, you know, that was my takeaway from all of that, that the Rid-X and all that stuff, as much as it's not necessary in my septic system, it's also not necessary in my aquariums, because I just really don't have a buildup of biological waste that doesn't break down. And there's different kinds of bacteria that break down different types of material. The meaty proteins in the fish food or dead fish or stuff in the tank, the proteins being broken down takes very different enzymes and bacteria than the plant waste, the cellulose-based material. It's completely different bacteria and enzymes that deal with that. And so you've got to have this culture, this colony of all these different types of bacterias that makes for a good, healthy, functioning ecosystem. Think about a forest. A forest has so many different animals, and then the more you look and the closer you get down into the level of like the little critters, then you get down to bugs and insects, and eventually you get down, eventually all the way down into the mycelia in the soil and everything to make sure the whole system functions. But an aquarium is the same way. It's not a box of water that has fish swimming around in it. It's an entire ecosystem that we have to manage and maintain. And once you've got it balanced, you don't need to keep, or you shouldn't need to keep adding all these, additives and so on and so forth. So let me hear your 2 thoughts on that, or your 2 cents on that. Give me your thoughts down below. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget, I do have memberships available now. Thanks for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.